Could I ask those who are waiting for the States to sit and in the coffee room adjacent to come into the States Chamber straight away, please? 3, 4, 6, 10, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Very well, the States now resumes debate on P21, the Jersey Sport Establishment, lodged by the Minister. Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Lefondre.
Yes, thank you, sir. I just wanted to make, I suppose, one observation and one query to the Assistant Minister. One is picking up on the comments made by the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel on page 4. And it says that members will note that the articles were signed on the 13th of January 2017, shortly after the Trust was established, and this was actually the creation of Jersey Sport Limited. The panel found it somewhat concerning that the need for States approval was not recognised until after this had taken place. So, as I've understood it, the structure was created, so the decision was made to create it, but actually the relevant approval hadn't been achieved first. And bluntly, I do find that somewhat astonishing. I understand that's been addressed by within the panel. I understand there are very good reasons for it. But I just wanted to put it on record, effectively, in Hansard, that that surely is not really an acceptable way going forward, and I hope lessons have been learnt from that. On a more, I suppose, when I say positive note, I do obviously note that the panel do recommend supporting this, and therefore I'm delighted to do so. The one caveat I would like just to ask from the Assistant Minister is I assume that the role of scrutiny and its ability to access information has been identified in the Memorandum of Understanding or the equivalent, and that that sort of issue has been dealt with up front. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak? Deputy St John.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, I'd like to ask the Assistant Minister if he could explain. On page 8 of the proposition, it refers to the key aims of the board, the purpose and the key aims. And it refers to, I'll say exactly what it says, to define the optimum operational and governance structure and report to the Assistant Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture on the strategic direction of the organisation and performance against business plans. In the scrutiny comments, they refer to the fact that the protection of the state's interests will rely to a large extent on effective monitoring of the partnership agreement and appropriate annual business plans agreed between the company and the department. I'd just like some confirmation from the Assistant Minister that the business plans will be agreed between both the company and the department, whether there will be key performance indicators for special reasons of measuring and monitoring so that people can be held to account. But more importantly, whether the partnership agreement will be put in a public format for the members of the public to hold them to account also.
Any other member wish to speak? Then I call on the Minister to reply. Assistant Minister to reply.
Sir? Probably work my way backwards through the comments, starting with Deputy Varwa. In regards to the key aims and governance structure, in regards to scrutiny, the answer is yes, they will be involved. In terms of the partnership agreement, to my knowledge, it will be a public document, be on public record about what will be involved within that public document. And I can confirm that the business plans, including KPIs and the targets, will be agreed with the department on a yearly basis, as with other arms-length bodies within the states. In regards to Deputy Lefondre, in terms of scrutiny, yes, I can confirm that they will be involved. And if you can just bear with me just a second, because I need to get into this. If I can also, what I'll do while I'm just getting into my iPad, can I thank Constable St-Saviour for her comments around about dance, and clearly dance is part of sport. Dance World Cup was a fantastic success last year. Yeah. I'll set myself up for that one. but obviously dance is an important part. A lot of the movement skills involved with dance are key elements of any physical literacy program, so dance is a very important part of the sporting community. Again, I thank Senator Ruccia for his comments and his support. Yeah, there were early challenges with Jersey Sport, but I think communication has been excellent all the way through. I think the briefings that we've given to states members, sports bodies and media alike, I think have been open and transparent all the way through, and there's certainly been no intention to hide anything as we worked our way through what has been quite a difficult process. In terms of Deputy Fondre, in terms of, I think he's probably talking about P70, I think, in terms of getting states approval. If he was nod to me. I don't know. Well, let's presume it's P70. I think as Assistant Minister, I decided to log a proposition seeking states approval to establish Jersey Sport as soon as I was given advice by officers that a proposition was probably needed. The question some members' minds may be, shouldn't the Assistant Minister have applied P170 earlier? Hindsight's a wonderful thing. It applies two ways. Some members may rely on it to accuse me or my department of not spotting the issue in good time, and I could perhaps be forgiven for relying on that in a different way. I personally wasn't a member of the Assembly when P170 was adopted. Had I been, I might have asked for some clarity regarding the meaning of Part B of that proposition. Does it require a state's decision when just one of the three conditions in Part B are met, or when all the conditions are met? It's not clear within that proposition about whether all three are met, and I've got the proposition here. It goes and, not or, and I think the decision was taken that it had to meet all three. The advice we were taking, it had to meet one of them, not all of them. How does the remuneration condition apply to a non-remunerated board with a paid chief executive as per the Jersey Sport model? What is the difference between financially sensitive data and ordinary financial data? I could go on, and I could perhaps make a case for a proposition to improve upon the P170 decision without undermining the intent of that proposition. And that's something that we mentioned to scrutiny about what P170 was set out to do. And I think it's well-intentioned, and I think I've got no doubt officers believe they were abiding by the terms of P170. But upon advice, we took the decision that it was the right thing to do to bring it to the Assembly today to be debated. In truth, though, however, I don't think it's really about semantics. What matters here was the intent of that proposition. In that respect, I can stand here today with hand on heart and say that there is not and never has been an intention to be anything other than open and honest about what we've been trying to do with Jersey Sport. The consultation documents were published, the consultants' reports were published, the ministerial decisions and accompanying documentation were published. The project as a whole has been one of the most publicly visible projects I can remember, and I'd respectfully invite members to consider those points when they decide how to vote. Going back to Deputy Tadier, he clearly values sport. I know he does. I know he enjoys sport himself, which I think is great. And he's given all the benefits involved with that. The 1.15 million that he talked about looks a lot of money, but compared with some of the decisions that are made in the UK in regards to investment into sports development, I can say we do really well in Jersey in terms of the investment we put into sport, and I'm comfortable with that level of funding. Yeah, could we have more? Could I go to Treasury Minister and ask for more? It's got to be balanced against the other priorities, I think, that the states have to deal with and ministers have to deal with. But I'm comfortable that we're at a level, I think, that can provide, I think, good support for our sports community. In terms of GDP, Deputy's right. I don't know what that figure is, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. I've already asked the department to deal with that issue. There is more to do, I think. We do need to deal with the sports department and relate more with other departments. Only very recently we were talking to the health department about how we can deal with, and I think with the nutrition strategy itself, about how we can work closely with the health department in terms of health prevention and how funding can be used to support both sides, not just sport, but health prevention as well. Boards were brought up by Deputy Tadier, and I can understand probably some misapprehensions and dislike of how boards have been set up in the past. There is a CNAG report that's going to come out soon that's going to look into how arms length bodies are managed, and I don't want to undermine or predetermine what that's going to say. And for me, that's probably a debate for this chamber for another day. I think we've done the right thing in strengthening the structure by having the minister as the enforcer, so that if there are any issues that can't be dealt with by the trust and the company itself, that the minister, if push comes to shove, can intervene. But it is really the last point of contact. If we can't deal with things, and I think that, within other arms length bodies, such as Visit Jersey and Jersey Business, when there have been issues, they've been dealt with, I think, sensibly and pragmatically by trustees and the board. It's never had to go to a decision for an enforcer to make. And I hope that would be the same with Jersey Sport. And looking at the experience of the board and looking at the experience of the trustees and their passion for sport, I can't imagine a situation where they couldn't deal with issues on a face-to-face basis and deal with it, hopefully, in a like I say, a pragmatic way. I mean, SOJDC was mentioned. For me, that's not a debate for today. Again, Deputy Taylor mentioned about the board being remunerated. The board is not going to be remunerated. Deputy Southern mentioned a figure of 95,000 within the report. There is a figure of 95,000 in the report, but it includes the CEO's remuneration. There's a very small figure within that sum for expenses for the board, as there are with most boards, and that's all they will receive. That's similar to some other boards. Other boards that members are paid, but in this particular case, the board is going to be unremunerated. They've been clear from day one when they were first appointed, and I think we've got members of the board in here today, that they wanted to be that they didn't feel it was right that the board would be remunerated, that it was very much a volunteer force in Jersey. Sport is very much it's got a huge volunteer base. The success story has been built on the success of volunteers and the coaches. I've been one example, and I don't always like mentioning the rugby club, but the rugby club is a fantastic example, with 700 young people in their academy, I think 105 or 110 coaches, all unpaid, all volunteers, all trying to get the best for young people within that sport. And that's just one example of all the sports and the amount of time and effort that volunteers put into that. I think that one of the phrases, I think, Deputy Taylor, you might be wrong, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, was you used the word questionable in regards to the board. Well, there's nothing questionable about that board. It is the most experienced board that I could expect to get in regards to overseeing sport in the island. Their experience is set out in the proposition, in the appendix at the back, and we're lucky to have people that are prepared to give that sort of time and effort up to take sport forward. Moving on to Deputy Southern. He's right. It has been difficult times for government. It's been difficult times for sport. Sports, it's the same with a lot of other departments. We've had to make savings within Sports Facilities Department and some small savings within the Sports Development Department. That's something that you have to expect. I would expect this board and Jersey Sport, rather than take away money from sport, will actually add money to sport, will add what they can offer to sport. It's clear that in terms of public and private funding, do I expect Jersey Sport to attract more private funding? Yes. But we've got to remember that sport in general in the island is supported hugely from private investment. Virtually any sport, in terms of sponsors, that's private investment. And if we can build on that with Jersey Sport, then I think that's something that we should do our best to do. Again, it was commented about the board being remunerated. It's not remunerated. That we've got enough boards, well, that's a matter of opinion. I think that in terms of this particular board, it's the right route to go. I said at the start of the speech that I thought the structure was right. This is not a board that's going to cost the states any money apart from a small amount of expenses. Virtually all the money that we give to Jersey Sport will go to sport, and making sure that we deliver sports development and physical literacy at a high level. Just want to stress again in regards to the recruitment process. People were offered jobs at Jersey Sport. Some decided not to take them up and decided other routes. One particular individual decided that he wanted to go back to university and enhance himself in that way. I think we need to support people like that when they make those decisions. But we've got an extremely strong team at Sports Development. I'm extremely proud of the work that they do. I think I've covered most of the points. If there's any particular point a member doesn't think I've covered, then I'm happy to answer it. But again, I really want to commend this to members. Please support it. You've got a fantastic board up there. You've got a fantastic team that just want to get on and do the best for sport in Jersey. You've got the Island Games coming up, something I'm desperately looking forward to. So let's try to give a mandate for sport to move on and do what I know it can do and deliver the best for our young people. It is about physical literacy, but it's also about keeping old people like me fit and healthy, and I think we've got to remember that. I want to work more closely with the Health Minister to ensure that everybody in the island gets the best opportunities in life to stay fit and healthy till while they're still walking the earth. So I very much commend this proposition and hope people can vote for it.
We have the appel, please.
Yeah, appel is called for. Invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the establishment of Jersey Sport, and ask the referee to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of voting. Ask the Greffier to close the voting. I can announce the proposition has been adopted. 39 votes in favour, 2 votes against.
The two, please, sir.
Greffier, please.
Deputy Sutherland Talia.
Before we move on, if I could just offer a couple of words of thanks, and I'll be very quick. I certainly want to thank the Jersey Sport Shadow Board for the amount of work and effort they put into preparing the sport report. As I've said, I think they will be a good guiding influence to sport in future. The trustees, the transition director, my staff at Sports Development, staff of the Sports Development team, who've been extremely patient, EDTSE officers who've given me fantastic support, and finally, I know it's not right to mention States officers by name, but this one's retired, so I hope I can. Jersey Sport has very much been driven forward by an individual who's given 20 years of work to supporting sport in the island, and he's only just retired, and that's Derek Delahaye. He was Mr. Sport. We're going to miss him. I miss him already because of some of the value judgments he's made and the support and the advice he's given me over the last 2.5 years. But I wish him well in his retirement, and I'm sure he's leaving sport in good hands. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we come to P25, standing orders, answers to questions. I ask the referee to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they have opinion, A, to agree that appropriate amendments should be made to standing orders to make new provisions in relation to the responses to oral questions, to provide that, 1, where lists of data are required in order to answer a particular oral question, these may be circulated to members in printed form at the time the answer is given. 2, answers given shall address the content of the question being asked and be confined to the subject matter of the question. If the presiding officer is of the opinion that the answer given fails to do so, he shall draw the member's attention to these requirements and standing orders and ask the member to attempt to address the content of the question more directly. B, to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to bring forward for approval the necessary amendments to give effect to the proposals.
Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And it appears that I'm in a rare position of actually getting support for this from the body concerned. So I'll try not to keep members too long. But before I do commence on what it is I'm proposing here, I just wish to draw members' attention to Standing Orders 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15, which refer to the format of question. And anything that's not there in what you can and can't ask and how you can and can't ask it is contained equally in Standing Orders 63 and 65. But there is very little in the entire realm of Standing Orders that refer to the answering of questions. And it seems to me that that is, if not equal in importance, probably more importance. The quality of the answer may well depend on the quality of the question, but let's get the questions right, and maybe we'll get the answers right. And we all know of experiences such as I highlight when ministers try their best, quite frankly, not to answer the question. I can't work out who was doing the romping there. As I put it in my report, as ministers have become more used to the format of question time, I sense an increase in the use of a technique I shall call the diversionary non-answer. In this, the questioner asks about subject A. The response, if he's lucky, contains some information about the related subjects B, C, D, and E. But at worst, if not, then the minister may inform the questioner about the totally unrelated X, Y, and Z. And we all know times when we've asked a question of ministers and got a non-answer. And our recourse when that happens. The response may contain all the right words and phrases and may be expressed fluently or haltingly, but nonetheless fails to address the question. Any further query is likely to be met with the ruling from the chair that that is how the minister has chosen to answer. Relevant or not, that's how he's going to answer. Now, my proposition consists of basically two parts, and it seems that the Procedures Committee is of like mind with me. They have been working on this particular aspect, and so therefore have come to support it effectively. What the Deputy is seeking to achieve with paragraph A2 is very similar to a prospective amendment that we have been working on. And I apologise, I wasn't aware that you were working on it. Nonetheless, this is a long-standing commitment of mine. In light of the fact that the Assembly will debate paragraph A2, we have decided not to proceed with our own prospective amendment for the time being, pending the Assembly's decision on Deputy Southern's proposition, for which I heartily thank those involved, that we are going to get some progress on this. And I take the opportunity to rather contradict my reputation as being somebody who's quick to sometimes anger and otherwise. In referring to the bottom of page 3 of the comments, where it says, the Deputy has previously sought the Assembly's approval of a measure such as this in Standing Orders Answers to Questions P30 of 2012. I've waited 5 years to revisit this particular topic. 5 years ago, it wasn't debated. I don't know if that's because we reached the summer recess or the Christmas recess. I think I withdrew it. But they say, at that time, comments on that position from PPC were such that a change could make question time less effective, as the committee's inquiries had shown that a significant proportion of question time in New Zealand, for example, is actually spent responding to points of order rather than answering questions. But I think the comments of PPC now actually deal with that. And they go on to say, In the report accompanying his proposition, Deputy Southern has acknowledged that the introduction of this provision could indeed make matters more problematical for the presiding officer, who would be asked to adjudicate on the relevance of an answer provided. However, were paragraph A2 to be adopted, there are measures which could be taken to mitigate the challenge facing the presiding officer and to ensure that question time did not, in fact, become less effective. And here, I must make reference to the people who are most often in the chair. What we have is two highly qualified lawyers, often in the chair, who know how to interpret questions, I believe, and can make sound judgments on whether a question actually, whether an answer actually addresses a question. PPC then refer to practice in Australia and suggest these procedures also provide that where there is such a dispute between the questioner and the minister answering or not answering, where there is such a dispute, the respondent is required to provide a more relevant answer in writing for the presiding officer to approve of within 48 hours. So it is possible to build in a mechanism to encourage accurate answers to questions from the very beginning, and a small procedure which is likely to ensure that. And I think that that represents a more efficient way of using our time. I express a conflict of interest, possibly, especially my time, because if I know what the answer is, I'll keep coming back until the minister admits whatever the answer is that's there. They can try and avoid, they can try and run, they can try and hide, but sooner or later I'll get there and I'll get the right question to ask, which elicits the right answer. However, A1 has not received a similar level of support from the PPC. So, and here I'm referring to oral questions, provide that where lists of data are required in order to answer a particular oral question, these may be circulated to members in printed form at the time the answer is given. There are occasions when, despite the best intentions, a factual or list or table is the appropriate answer to respond to an oral question. At which point, one often gets the minister reading out a list of things, and you're trying to note it and say, what percent was that? How many people didn't get on the waiting list? Etc., etc. Far easier it would be to give the table and then illustrate it with the debate. Once again, that would cut down time, I think, and be more efficient. But in terms of getting the right answer. And so my wording, although as part B, it's open to PPC to come up with the formula, to request the PPC to bring forward for approval the necessary amendments to give effect to the proposals. My version is that an answer that seeks to address the question asked must be given if it can be consistent with public interest. And that's the New Zealand version, that the answer must address the question. I believe the PPC we're talking about must be relevant to the question. I marginally think mine's better, but I would accept what PPC come with as the amendment to standing orders in order for us to achieve the end result of getting straightforward and correct answers to questions which are asked. So I maintain my proposition, sir.
Proposition seconded.
Sir.
Member to speak, Deputy Kevin Lewis.
Thank you, sir. This is something that I can support, sir. Many of the answers from ministers at the moment I would not consider to be answers, but a response Some of the questions fall far short of what is expected, and might as well read the weather forecast or restaurant menu for all the use that some of them are. I know that there are certain things that have to be confidential, and fully appreciate that. But questions with notice, ministers have plenty of time to talk things over with their officers to make sure that everything is clear, concise, and above board. I will be supporting the proposition, sir.
The one who wishes to speak. Deputy
Tati. It's a little bit hard on the weather forecasters, I think, to make that analogy, because the weather forecast is usually quite useful and helpful in its response. And even on a menu, one can normally find something that one wants to order, which isn't the case with ministerial responses. Deputy Southern was quite right to highlight the fact that this isn't a knee-jerk response, this proposition. It's not the first resort. This is in many ways it reflects a long period of struggle, and not just with the current president, where issues have been raised on the floor of the Assembly when members feel that they haven't received adequate responses to their questions. But in the past, we do appreciate, I think at this point, it's important to add that the chair is often in a difficult position when where he has to interpret the standing orders, and there isn't any latitude within standing orders. And of course, so Deputy Southern is taking in many ways the advice of the chair in the past, which says that if you don't like it, then bring a proposition to the Assembly to change it, which is where we find ourselves today. You could argue that it's a shame that we find ourselves in this position, because I think although we come from different perspectives and starting points politically in this Assembly, I think we all agree that if a question is good enough to be asked, if it's in order and it can be tabled and lodged, then it deserves an answer. We often hear the Speaker of the Commons saying the question will be heard and the answer will be heard. In a slightly different context, that's usually when there's too much noise and yaboo going on from both sides. But he quite emphasises the fact that parliamentary questions serve an important role. They're not there for fun. Of course, they can be done for different reasons, but they're there to try and find out information and to get the opinions of the government of the day on any particular issue, and to see how they respond and if they're doing their job. That's part of the small s scrutiny that we all have a role in playing, especially those of us who are not part of the executive. And we've seen today, again, another example of very simple questions, which are essentially yes or no questions, not being answered, and obfuscation being used instead. And it's unfortunate because it's not all of the Council of Ministers or all ministers who choose to respond in that way. We know that some ministers are much more direct in their answers, and I'm quite happy to name some of the good ministers, I think, when it comes to answering questions. For example, we know that the Minister for Environment gives very straight answers when we ask him questions. Doesn't mean we always necessarily like the answers we're given, but we do. He does try and address the question and give a straight answer. Similarly, I think the Transport Minister gives straight answers to straight questions. He's the minister who notably stood up in this Assembly before it was in vogue.
Just a point of clarification. There's no such thing as the Minister for Transport in Jersey.
And even when he's not being asked a question, he still volunteers helpful information which wasn't requested, which helps clarify the debate. And I think we appreciate that. As I was going to say, he was one of the ministers who, before it became vogue to admit that the long-term care charge was in fact a tax, he told us that quite voluntarily and said it doesn't really matter what you call it. I'm quite relaxed about it being called a tax, before the rest of the Council of Ministers realised they had to call it a tax for accounting purposes when it became advantageous to them. He was telling us this a long time before. Now, I probably don't need to tell you the ministers who aren't as faultless when it comes to their answers. But what I can say is give you two examples. This morning I had to ask a question about information which was put out on the radio by somebody who falls under the Health Minister's responsibility. And I finished that by asking him a direct question saying, do you agree that the Barnes report stated quite clearly that there is evidence showing the efficacy of smoked cannabis in relation to pain relief? Now, that's a yes or no question. And rather than actually say yes or no, he decided to answer a different question, which I didn't ask. He said something to the effect, and Hansard will show this, I agree that the report recommends not smoking marijuana. Now, of course, it may have said that, but that's not the question I was asking. And I think that's the point that Deputy Kevin Lewis is making, is that you can give a completely unrelated answer to the question, one which I didn't ask, and that remains in order somehow. But when you ask a question, you have to make sure that your question is in order. And we're often told, oh, that deviates too far from the original question, if, of course, we are allowed to put a supplementary question in. But I'm not having a go at the chair here today, so I should probably rein those comments in. But the point is, we have to make sure, and it's quite right that, of course, the question does relate to the general issue, even supplementaries. But it's okay for ministers to give completely unrelated answers. Now, when this happens, is that satisfactory for anyone, especially for the public outside who are listening, when we're constantly put in a position where we don't get satisfactory answers, so we have to come back, either by resubmitting the same question again, possibly in a different format, only for the minister to either remain intransigent or to decide a few weeks down the line that he is prepared to give a straight answer. And we saw this morning with the Chief Minister. Only a few months ago, we've had to relodge the same question time and time again and to ask supplementaries the same question saying, did you ask for your ministers to resign or did they offer to resign? And he wouldn't answer that question. And he wouldn't even explain really why he wouldn't answer that question. He didn't say, I'm not going to answer that because these discussions are privileged and we discussed them at Council of Ministers, but I can't give you a confirm nor deny, which actually would have been a more helpful answer. He just refused to answer that and then went on the political offensive, which he's able to do. But during question time, that's not a good use of time. So again, we relodge the same questions. It takes up the time of the greffier to process those same questions again. There's, of course, a notional cost to that, but there's also very real manpower considerations that go into that. And what does that do to the esteem of politics in general, to the esteem of members? Because the public don't differentiate between the executive and the non-executive. They just see, oh, questions are being asked again. Ministers are not addressing the questions. And so even the good ministers out there get tarred with the same brush when these other ministers stand up, especially when it's the Chief Minister, the head of government, not answering straight questions. But he seemed to be okay this morning to say, oh yeah, I didn't ask them to resign. And I look forward to him showing the workings with that and perhaps providing evidence. But he's given an answer after several months to say he didn't ask for them to resign. The question, of course, remains whether or not they offered to resign or whether there were discussions going around that. But we've had to wait months for him to even concede on that one point. So, and I also remember there was a time when we had an invitation. We do get esteemed guests come over every now and again. I think I may have been on BBC at the time. A speaker from New Zealand came over, and he at some point had been the speaker of their assembly. And I don't think he was at the time when he came over, and said, look, it's not unusual in New Zealand for us to go back time and time again. And when I was in the chair, if the ministers didn't give an answer to a certain question, I would stop the proceedings and say, Minister, you've been asked a question, please give an answer which addresses that question. And he would do it 5 or 10 times a la Paxman if he needed to do that. And he was quite clear about what his role was. Therefore, it was to protect the public interest. Now, if we need more clarification with that in our standing orders to give our chair the ability to do that, then I think it's something which we should certainly do.
Deputy Whittington.
Thank you, sir. I was kind of glad when I heard that PPC were bringing forward the changes in standing orders. I've always thought that it's a little bit strange that there are over 40 paragraphs in standing orders on how you can ask a question and one on how it can be answered. And that clearly just says it has to be concise. So you can concisely answer a question that doesn't even fit what was asked, but as long as it's concise, it fits within standing orders. So I was glad that it was happening. And I think that the answering should be there. We're a transparent government. I think it's right that answers. I do feel like it's a little bit strange that last time I got to give answers to questions, Deputy Southern actually had a go at me for being too concise. His advice was that I should be more ministerial and probably not answer questions, though I know that was joking. I'm never going to have that chance if this is passed. I do support this in part 2. I have a problem with part 1. There already is written questions times. It's up to us to know whether our question is going to ask for lots of data, and if it is, you put it in a written question so you can get your lists. And then we've got oral questions, and it's up to us to know what we're asking. Is it just an answer that can be done verbally? Then we put it in the oral questions. If not, there's more time. We have to put it in earlier, actually, for written questions. So I would ask Deputy Southern if he would allow to take A1 and A2 separately, so I could choose which ones, if that's okay.
I presume they can be taken separately, sir?
It's up to you.
But other than that, I fully support A2. I just think that A1 steps across the bounds of something we've already got. Thank you, sir.
Any other members to speak? Deputy Bree.
Thank you very much, sir. I feel it to be a sad indictment of this Assembly that we're actually debating this proposition. It reflects badly on all of us. The very fact that Deputy Southern has lodged this proposition, to my mind, illustrates only too clearly the way in which this Council of Ministers acts towards and treats the Assembly. Government should be open, transparent and answerable. It should not seek to avoid answering questions. It should not seek to play politics inside this Assembly. If we look at the proposition itself, whilst I agree with perhaps the comments that Deputy Wickenden just made about Part A1, if you actually read the proposition itself, it says, where lists of data are required in order to answer a particular oral question, these may be circulated. Not must or will or have to be. Now, it may be that there is an urgent question that needs to be asked, an urgent oral question, that the respondent feels the best way to do it is to be able to provide a table of informational figures to members of this Assembly so that whilst he is actually answering the question, they can understand the detail. What I find most saddening is the wording of A2 and the fact that we're actually debating this. And I'll just draw you back to the wording of the proposition because I seek to remind members, sir, we vote on propositions, not reports. Answers given shall address the content of the question being asked and be confined to the subject matter of the question. The fact that we're actually looking at that, to me, saddens me greatly that the state of this government is that Deputy Southern is having to ask this Assembly to agree to that phrase, and anybody who is even considering voting against this proposition should look deep inside themselves, because what you are going to be voting against is a truthful answer to a truthful question. And therefore, sir, I urge all members to support this proposition without question. Thank you, sir.
I'm sure you mean, Deputy, that all the answers would be truthful, but they just would be to different questions.
Indeed I did, sir. Thank you.
Senator Bunch.
So I'm going to vote against this proposition. And it's not because I do not agree with Deputy Bree that ministers should be, so far as possible, open, transparent and answerable to this Assembly. Parliamentary questions, as members all know, are one of the great methods of holding ministers and governments to account. They require skill on the part of the person asking the question, and they require transparency on the part of the minister. Sometimes ministers cannot answer a question, and this may be because they don't know the answer, and they should do. And in such circumstances, ministers deserve to be exposed and held to account for their lack of competence. But sometimes it is not politic to answer a question in the way in which it has been framed, perhaps because it would reveal information which ought not to be put into the public domain. It might be damaging to Jersey's relationships with a foreign country, or even with the United Kingdom. It might be that to give an answer to a question would breach a confidence which ought not to be broken. At the end of the day, it seems to me that members and the public know very well when a minister is prevaricating and is not answering a question for a reason which they regard as insubstantial or inadequate. And it is the job of questioners, of members in those circumstances, to exercise their skills and to expose the minister for his or her deficiencies. I don't think, sir, that the Privileges and Procedures Committee ought to spend time trying to deal with a problem which is really incapable of being dealt with in standing orders. It seems to me that the way in which ministers answer questions and the skill which members employ in questioning ministers is all part of the cut and thrust of politics. Either it's done well or it's not done well. And I don't think that anything, frankly, is going to be added by prescribing in standing orders that answers ought to be given in a certain way. I certainly don't think that we ought to involve the President of the Assembly in this process. The chair should be above squabbles between ministers and members. It's not up to the chair to direct a minister to answer in a particular way. It's up to members to expose the minister for the inadequacy of his reply. And I deplore the notion that the President of the Assembly should be drawn into what is essentially a political process. And for that reason, and not because I don't disagree with, because I disagree with Deputy Bree's opening remarks, I'm going to vote against this proposition.
Deputy Norton.
Thank you, sir. I rise to agree and disagree, actually, with the colleague to my right, Deputy Bree. I think we should, sir, have open transparency when it comes to questions and answers. And actually, Deputy Wickenden was absolutely right. There are reams and reams on how to ask a question, and there are very few on how you should answer it. And so from that point, I think it is right that we move ourselves towards more transparency, more respect for answering questions clearly. However, I was drawn to stand simply because Deputy Bree was saying the fact that we're actually debating this in here. Well, anything that we change to standing orders has to be debated in here. It's the only way that we can change anything in standing orders. I don't think there's anything wrong with debating anything in here. That's what we're actually in here to do. So let's not beat ourselves up over this. Let's just get on with it. I think actually it's quite a sensible proposition.
Call upon Deputy Lally.
Thank you, sir. And in answer to Senator Balash, we have already this morning had an instance where the chair picked up a minister picked up the Chief Minister on an answer that was given and part of the question wasn't answered. And I have to say, I marvel at this chair's powers of concentration to be able to listen to all of that and pick it out and pick members up. I hope that members, and I don't think that will ever detract from the chair, his ability to do that, or his or her ability to do that. And members are grateful when that happens. And I hope members understand the difference between answering questions in this House and answering questions outside of it. For instance, to the media, where what one does there is decide on one's answer and one's message and deliver it to whatever question is asked repetitively. And this is because if it is a recorded interview or a newspaper interview, they hold the power to be able to select your soundbite or your clip. So the answer is you give them the same soundbite that you want broadcast again and again and again, regardless of the question. It's not a good idea to do that on a live interview over the course of 5 minutes because you can come over as slightly lacking. Providing answers in this House, however, to backbenchers is different. I'm the new boy here. I don't need to lecture members on that. And I think sometimes, I often think it would be better if ministers were to be honest to say, I have to reserve my position on this. I cannot answer you, or I do not know. Mea culpa, put their hands up. And let's not forget, very often ministers' questions are answered by their support team in terms of their officers in their departments. So it would take a minor adjustment to be able just to tell the officers, let's tell the truth here. And so I'm struggling to see how Deputy Southern's proposition will hurt us in any way. What is the harm with it? Because I do think over successive governments, they have often been blighted by an inability to come clean, and there is honour in that, and it will be better. And we saw a valiant effort from the Treasury Minister this morning, being incredibly loyal and incredibly careful, and of course one understands. But one wonders if there might have been a more successful course. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't go with Deputy Southern on this.
Any other members to speak? Deputy Martin.
Yes, thank you, sir. And I wasn't going to rise until Senator Balash spoke, but I'll just go back a bit to a bit of history, because I was on the subcommittee of PPC, and when we were appointed, myself and Senator Osef emailed everyone and said, we're now 10 years down the line, we want you to all look at standing orders and come back to us and what do you want amended. And it was probably Deputy Southern who brought this to my attention, and I've done a lot of work on it, but I don't hold that against him. But I just tell him that we are literally ready to go, so I'm supporting him, and the work behind it is all done, and all the other standing orders that are agreed are going to be lodged imminently. So that's good, and as I say, it's whoever brought it, and I felt Deputy Southern's frustration. It was a few, probably 4 or 5 sittings ago, when he couldn't get an answer to anything, and he actually lodged this, I think, the next day. But we are where we are, so I absolutely support him. I rose, sir, because it was Senator Balash, and it is, I don't know, I think sometimes he just presses my buttons, as you say, but obviously he doesn't want to answer. He says it's down to me to come in and have some sort of Tom and Jerry game with him to find out what the answer to the question is. No, I haven't got time for that. When they wrote these standards orders that the answer must be concise, I think they obviously thought that the makeup of the minister was going to produce an answer relevant to the question. And that is all that PPC will bring back, relevance. Because I don't want to ask you something, sir, ask a minister something, and is the sky blue today? Well, it was when I came in, but I haven't seen the sky since 8 o'clock this morning. And it just doesn't, it's all games. And I really think that listening to Senator Balash, where he says we, and then we, with all due respect, sir, we get one, possibly, if sometimes one supplementary, and that's when we want to come in. But if ministers come with the right answer that they know, and I absolutely fully take into account what Senator Balash said about it could be confidential, it could be highly, nobody's saying you can't say that, but we are experienced enough people. These questions, we don't make them up and just come to the ministers. They go through the chair, sir, they go through you. So anything that was really confidential or likely to cause harm would not be allowed. And if it was, then the minister can stand up and say that. So I thank Deputy Southern for bringing the the hard work that we've done on PPC. It's ready to go, and I just think it should be supported. I fully understand people might have a concern about part 1, which is, as Deputy Wickenden said, it's sort of, could it have been a written question that somebody forgot to get in on time? And I can see the Social Security Minister nodding, because things that need graphs and research and figures, it's Monday morning, 9 a.m, week before the state sitting, get your written questions in and you'll get all your graphs. Doesn't stop you by the Thursday to follow it up with an oral question, knowing you'll have the data early, and you normally get it now a day before the state sitting, so you can then ask your oral question and you will have the data to back it up. So I leave it up to, I'm going to support it, but I leave it up to other people, because I feel where Deputy Wicken's coming from. We have 2 sets of questions. One, obviously, we can see it written because they're going to need lots of data, graphs and everything else, and research. And that's why people are given extra time for written questions. So I commend Deputy Southern. I support both parts, and I hope other people will do. Thank you.
Deputy North.
Thank you, sir. I share Deputy Wickenden's and the previous speaker's concern about part A1 in terms of providing more detailed data for an oral question. I stand, sir, really to as almost like, as a request to PPC, although it's not in this proposition, and that's really about. I feel where the problem is coming from is particularly the supplementary questions, and supplementary questions where we have long speeches followed by does the minister agree, and if not, why not? So something that if members weren't present, I had the pleasure to partake in the youth assembly and to answer questions from those young people. And if it is available still on the webcast from that, then I urge members to watch even just a few minutes of it, because they teach this assembly a good lesson, sir, and that is a lesson on how to ask questions. Members will get very, very good, concise, truthful, to-the-point answers if they ask to-the-point questions, sir, and I've probably spoken enough already, sir. So I plea to PPC to look up at questions as well, and a plea to members to make their questions to the point and to skewer the minister or whoever is the subject of the question to answer it, sir.
Anyone wish to speak?
So I wanted to rise post Deputy Labby's speech, who was, as ever, entertaining and hit the nail on the head about how members should respond to media interviews outside of this place. He's got to be careful he's not giving all the secrets away. What I did, however, just want to say, sir, that in case there were any doubt, and I'm sure he wasn't trying to suggest that officers provide untruthful information in answer to questions. They do not. They often, sir, and you have to pull ministers up for this, provide a blessing of information which is exceeds the requirements under standing order. And ministers often have to cut that down to the detail which is most connected and answers the question as directly as possible. So I think Deputy Noel is absolutely right. It's never the opening question that's there in black and white that Minister has the black and white answer to. It's always the supplementary questions. And even the mover of this proposition knows that his real question is either his second question or his final supplementary. And that is how we answer questions. So in my experience, and the older I get, there are very few questions in life that have a simple yes and no answer. And it was Deputy Tadia who tried to suggest that they did. If ministers would just simply give a yes and a no answer, all would be well. So just like questioners wish to give the context of their question, and you ask questioners to get to the question, so you ask ministers to get to the answer, because ministers too like to address the context of the answer to which they will be providing. So I slightly divulge from my colleague here to my right, your left, sir, and take the view that actually PPC should be allowed to do this work because any clarity around how questions should be answered will provide clarity to members. And as Deputy Wickenden said, there are any number of standing orders that deal with how questions should be framed, but very few when it comes to how answers should be framed. But I say to members, sir, very few questions actually have a yes and no answer and do require more detailed context in order to get to that answer. So like Deputy Southern, I have no doubt that you and the Deputy Bailiff will be able to navigate that well. You already, I think I enjoy being corrected by you on not quite every sitting, sir, but perhaps it's coming to that. And I have no doubt that others do too. So I do support this. I'm more doubtful about the accompanying detailed information for the reasons that others have said. Written questions are to provide the detailed technical graphs or tables of information, and officers spend a lot of time getting that ready, then being expected to get ready another set of detailed information for a Tuesday morning probably is asking too much. But again, it does say may, and as long as there's no obligation upon ministers to do that. But as used to be the tradition, sir, chairmen or presidents of committees and ministers used to stand up and say this would be better given as a written question, and therefore I ask the member to provide it as a written question. But with those caveats, then I am prepared to ask PPC to undertake the work, because as Deputy Martin said, it's already virtually done.
Any other member wish to speak?
Yes, sir.
Senator Ruggiero.
Thank you, sir. I felt it was incumbent on me as being one of the features of this proposition. As, in the appendix is a extract from Hansard of, and it's given examples of evasive and non-answers, which were predominantly, well, by myself. So I would like just to clarify that there is a difference between perhaps being deliberate or not about whether trying to be deliberately evasive and not answering questions. But I can assure members that I do my very best to answer the questions that I to the best of my ability and not to be evasive. In fact, the deputy has just remarked upon, this comes from training, but some people have remarked to me this has actually been a masterclass of how to do it. But I certainly, as I say, it's not trying to be evasive by any shape or form. Obviously I've been in this assembly for a little while now, and in the very early days, it was actually a very rare occasion we would get a question for any president, and it was sort of, it was what used to happen is that if a member had something he wanted to find out, he would get in touch with the president, get in touch with a member of a committee, get in touch with the department and find out that answer. I know members like to ensure that the public and the electorate know what they're asking for, but to be effective about how to actually achieve something, to bring forward a proposition. There are other ways of doing it, and I would just ask members to keep that in mind. I'm not saying that they shouldn't ask questions in this assembly, but I'm just saying there are other ways of achieving things. And with our privilege of being able to ask questions in this assembly, it actually comes with responsibilities as well, because we should recognise that the questions that are laid before us, that ministers are asked to answer, does involve a tremendous amount of work in departments to actually get the answers ready for this assembly. And I can assure members that it can take days to get those answers ready. I'm just stating the fact. I'm not sort of saying the rights or wrongs of it. I'm just stating a fact. It really takes a considerable amount of time to provide those answers. So I would really, the work can go ahead, certainly. I mean, I don't have a problem with the work for the part 2. A1, I think, is it's been said previously about deciding what is appropriate for a written question and what's appropriate for an oral question. A written, if it's going to be requiring a lot of information and a lot of detail and graphs and all the rest of it, well, they should be put in on time to actually get that information in an appropriate way, so they can get the correct answer. I'll leave it there, sir, but I think that we do our best to answer the questions the best we possibly can. For my part, I don't try to be evasive. If the answers come over as evasive, well, I'm only sorry, but that's not the intention. I just ask members to accept that getting on your feet to answer supplementary questions on the spur of the moment can be a difficult thing for a minister. And they have to think on their feet, and sometimes the answers come out not quite as the questioner would like. So please, just keep that in mind, and let's all move forward in trying to ask appropriate questions that are going to be of value to our community, so that the ministers can give the right answers.
Anyone who wish to speak? Then I call on the proposer to reply.
Thank you, sir, and I thank everybody who's spoken, including Senator Balash, despite his opposition to what I want to achieve here. Most were, by and large, positive. And Deputy Tadier, I think, first pointed out the importance of questions. They are, in fact, part of the scrutiny process. They are attempting to hold ministers to account. And I think that's a valid way of behaving. Deputy Wickenden was the first to say that they had reservations around my A1, which talked about where you might require a list of facts or a table in order to properly or more easily answer a question. But that doesn't say must. It doesn't say shall. It says may. May, down to the minister thinking, what's the best way to answer this question? Give him a table and then talk to it, or give this string of data, one after the other, that nobody's going to recall, and you'll only remember what they said when you get to Hansard a few weeks later. Or you run the live video and say, oh, that's what he said. Oh, gosh, I missed that. So the may, I think, is critical there. It's down to the minister. If he thinks it's appropriate, use it by all means. But 9 times out of 10, 99 out of 100 questions where there is extensive data required, we usually manage to meet the deadline, and it gets done at the weekend. I really want this detail. I want to drill down. Come on, give me the answers if you can. The single most stirring argument for voting for this proposition is obviously Deputy Bree, who's remarkably sad. And I would suggest that members might want to make his day and cheer him up a bit. Senator Balash, then, just briefly, I don't know is a perfectly legitimate question. It's relevant and it addresses the matter of the question. I don't know is perfectly acceptable. it addresses the point. I'm not so sure about this answer may be prejudicial to the interests of the state, and where that borders the boundary between this answer might be prejudicial to me from a minister. But nonetheless, there are occasions when non-answer is the appropriate response. That's certainly acceptable. I don't see a problem with that. Deputy Norton, yes, the key word for me was there, more sensible. Yeah, this is a sensible way forward. And Deputy Martin, I praise her efforts and PPC in being ready to go, as it were, straight away, because they've done a substantial amount of work on it. And I tip my hat to those involved. No problem. And look forward to the variant, the form of words that PPC comes out with. And finally, addressing Senator Routier and the Chief Minister. The Chief Minister in particular said we often have a blessing of information as part of the answer, in which case the Minister can go to the bits that he chooses, which is a lesson to us all. Don't ask a question on more than one topic. Go where you want to go, and perhaps with the amendment, that with the change to standing orders I'm proposing, you might get the answer and not the other answer, because your question wasn't focused enough. Focus, right questions will, from now on, I hope, get the right answers. I maintain the proposition, sir.
All those in favour, the appell's called forward by them.
Content to take the two parts, A1 and A2, separately.
The bill is called for, invite members to return to their seats. The first vote is on paragraph A1 about lists of data. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of voting, I ask the greffier to close the voting. This part of the proposition is carried. 26 votes in favour, 14 votes against.
Any other 14, please?
14 against are Senators Routier, McLean, Gorst, Farnham, Balash, Green, Constables of St Mary and St Martin, and Deputy Noel, Deputy St John, Deputy St Martin, Deputy Bryan, Deputy Wickenden, and Deputy Norton.
Deputy, for the purposes of saving time, as that has been adopted, can we take A2 and B together, because the PPC will do something. Very well. Ask the greffier to reset the voting, and the next vote is on paragraph A2 and B. Ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of voting. Ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce that A2 and B have been adopted. 38 votes in favour, 4 votes against.
Can we have the 4, please?
The 4 are Senators Farnham and Balash, Deputy Pinnell, Deputy St Martin.
We now come to the Jersey Employment and Discrimination Tribunal appointment of chairman and members at P28, lodged by the Minister for Social Security. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to appoint further to a process overseen by the Jersey Appointments Commission and in accordance with the Employment and Discrimination Tribunal Jersey Regulations 2014, the following persons as members of the Jersey Employment and Discrimination Tribunal, each for a period of 5 years, to begin from the date of state's approval. Mrs. Hilary Griffin, Mr. Michael Salter, Mr. Ian Jones, Mr. Neil Vautier, Mr. Alan Kearney.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to propose the appointment of 5 new members to the Employment and Discrimination Tribunal following an open recruitment process earlier this year. We were seeking a new chairman, a deputy chairman, and 2 employee representative lay members to hear complaints made under the employment and discrimination laws. The role of chairman is clearly an important one, and so I'm delighted that one of our current deputy chairmen, Hilary Griffin, was successful in her application. Hilary has been an extremely capable deputy chair and she clearly has the necessary skills and experience to progress to the position of chairman. We were also grateful to receive a number of good quality applications for the other vacancies, and I am pleased to propose the appointment of 2 additional deputy chairmen, Ian Jones and Michael Salter, and 2 lay members, Alan Kearney and Neil Vautier. The candidates all possess relevant knowledge, skills and experience for these positions, and I am grateful that they have agreed to take on this important responsibility. If this proposition is adopted, the 5 members will be appointed today, each for a 5-year term of office. Sir, I ask members to accept the proposition.
Seconded. Any member wish to speak? All members in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show. Those against, the proposition is adopted. We now come to P29, Regulation of Care Workers' Employment Standards, lodged by Deputy Southern, and ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they have opinion to request the Minister for Health and Social Services to A. remove from the approved provider framework, APF, for home care agencies whose employment practices fall significantly below the standards applied to staff delivering care services fully funded by his department, such as rapid response and palliative care teams. B. Ensure that any future applicants to join the APF at least meet the employment standards applying to staff delivering care services fully funded by his department. And C. Ensure that regulations he plans to introduce under the Regulation of Care Jersey Law 2014, creating a framework for regulation of care services by the new Health and Social Care Commission, include requirements for providers of personal domestic care to apply employment standards at least equivalent to the standards applied currently to staff delivering care services fully funded by his department.
I didn't quite catch that. I wondered if
Deputy Southern. Perhaps you'd like a moment
Thank
to
you,
get
sir.
your papers together.
No. It's all right. Let's get to the front page. And the words of the proposition, as always, start with the proposition, and we'll see where we are. And I'll start, if I may, like with the last proposition, with the reverse order. We'll start with C of my proposition, part C. Ensure, it calls upon the Minister for Health to ensure that regulations he plans to introduce under the Regulation of Care, Jersey Law 2014, creates a framework for regulation of care services by the new Health and Social Care Commission, include requirements for providers of personal and domestic care to apply employment standards at least the equivalent to the standards applied currently to staff delivering care services fully funded by his department. And the key here is that as a result of the changes brought about in order to deliver P82, getting care into the community, we've arrived at a situation where the family nursing organisation has a 2-tier workforce. It has some workers on States of Jersey terms and conditions, and some workers on vastly reduced terms and conditions in order to try and put a system together because of changes to the funding of home care. So it refers to applying the higher level of terms and conditions in order to ensure that clients remain safe with a good level of care brought to them and that employees are not thereby exploited. The question is, why is this brought? Do we have a problem? Where are we? And I will attempt throughout this presentation to inform members where we are. Returning to B, on the proposition says, ensure that any future applicants to join the APF, the Approved Provider Framework for Care, at least meet the employment standards applying to staff delivering care services fully funded by his department. So it's the same reference to the two-tier system. You've got one set of workers doing similar jobs, care workers, on one set of terms and conditions, and another set on a reduced set of terms and conditions. And it's saying, in the future, make sure people apply the best terms and conditions. And then Part A says, remove from the Approved Provider Framework, the APF, for home care agencies whose employment practice falls significantly below the standards applied to staff delivering care services fully funded by his department, such as rapid response and palliative care teams. So 3 groups there. Those who are already on the APF, those who are about to be on the APF, and ensure regulations apply in future the best of standards. In response to my proposition, the comments of the Health and Social Services Minister received on the 22nd, so yesterday, so barely enough time to read them, say that, in fact, the Approved Provider Framework cannot cater for what I wish. And it says, for example, the Approved Provider Framework does not make any reference to employment practices or standards in its provisions, and there is no intention for it specifically to do so. Does that mean that terms and conditions of employees are safe and of high standard, and that the terms and conditions do not affect safety issues or care issues? I believe they do not. The Minister says there is no intention for our regulations to cater for that. Further on, it says these regulations, meaning APF regulations, do not relate to standards of employment because the law does not provide the relevant powers. I'm asking the Health Minister to adopt those powers and to change the law if necessary to do so, because I believe there's a problem. In summary, the Minister says, members are urged to reject the proposition on the grounds that neither the Approved Provider Framework nor the regulation of care law, which are intended to monitor and regulate standards of care, are appropriate vehicles for setting requirements such as the minimum wage. These issues are always a matter for employers and employees. And here we come to the rub. The change from what we used to have with the arrangement with family nursing services to deliver a whole set of services in the home has been largely abandoned. And now we've got the free market. And we are seeing the effects of the free market. This morning, the Minister suggested that in order to maintain the service that he has contracted with family nurses in terms of home care, he will, if necessary, go to any of the 22 other companies which are providing domestic care and seek their cooperation. And as I pointed out this morning, what that does is break that essential link of trust and caring that goes on between a long-term carer and the clients receiving that care. You do not readily allow a stranger to bathe you, to get you up, to look after you should you be incontinent, It's got to be a special bond. The continuity of care, whatever else happens from now on, will go under this situation. And it points out on the second page of the comments why I believe the use of the free market doesn't work. It says employers in the care sector set terms and conditions appropriate to the market in which they operate. And this is the proper comparator. In setting terms and conditions of employment, they take into account what they as private and third sector businesses can afford in order to recruit and retain staff. For their part, with a range of employers, employees can look for the best overall terms and conditions package and the working arrangements that suit them. So the free market has arrived, and that rules this relationship between employee and employer, each seeking their own best interest. Now, until recently, the best employer clearly was district nursing, family nursing. I keep calling it district nurses. If I do, forgive me. It's family nursing, provided by family nursing, who've got by far and away the best terms and conditions. But for a group of them, care workers in particular, around 70 still, those conditions have been removed and watered down so that you could hardly see them. Now, in terms of the larger issue, the care of the elderly in particular, but of anybody needing care specifically, for the UK is a serious problem. They have a free market. They do not have the staffing necessarily to be able to provide a full service. And what's worst of all, they don't have the funding to supply this social care element. And we're seeing an election taking place in the UK over what do we do about this, because they're actually, quite frankly, in a mess. Now, we have made the magnificent move of getting the funding straight. We have instituted a long-term care fund which can deliver the funding for this service. What we must be aware of is that we also have to be able to provide the staffing for this service. And I believe that that is put at risk. And the Minister has in the past made the mistake of referring to domestic services as by and large shopping and cleaning, etc. Although I'm sure he wouldn't do that today. Home care services involve the provision of personal and domestic care to people of all ages with physical, sensory, mental health and learning disabilities. These services play a vital part in ensuring that people are able to live in their own homes with dignity. And this is the point. If we are to get them in their own homes and not in central locations, in hospital, then we have to provide the right services. Care workers provide a very large range of services, including washing, dressing, assisting with medication, dealing with incontinence, and rehabilitative care, classified as personal care, and also some domestic care. In many cases, home carers are the only people who have daily contact with vulnerable people, and in practice, these workers take on wider responsibility for the very well-being of those they look after. This is a vital, essential service which is only going to expand into the future. Let's be ready to make sure that it can be made to work. But as a result of P82, the health and social care system integrated out-of-hospital services with a range of partner organisations. And as a result of this policy change, the Minister of Health and Social Services removed the subsidy first from domestic care and now removed from personal care from the previous sole provider of these services, family nursing and healthcare. In effect, the Minister has opened the market to personal care, as in the UK, to competition from private and not for-profit organisations. So what we mustn't do is repeat the mistakes of the UK in opening the market. And we can take a look at what's happened in the UK, and my report on pages 6 and 7 does just that, and what a sorry, sad tale it is over the past decade or so, as we've seen private provider 1, for example, 0 hours contracts, paid for work done and no travel time. Private provider 3, 0 hours, paid for work done and no travel time. This is the very bottom of the barrel. This is a job which takes place in people's homes, around the island, and must be around the island, and yet here are companies competing and saying the best we can do is no payment for travel time. Now, I've seen what that means in some of the worst cases. That means 12 hours of contact time, in one particular example, on a 15-hour day. 15 hours from 7 o'clock in the morning, on call, 12 hours of contact. And what the quality of delivery was at the end of that 15-hour day, at 10 o'clock at night, for that last hour, I don't know. And I'm sure the person concerned, the carer concerned, was doing her best. But I think, for my part, if I'd been on the end of that 15-hour day, the quality of my service might be somewhat lacking towards the end of that day. Now, that's the sort of. Does that enhance safety? Does that enhance care? Does that actually meet the needs not only of the clients, but also the employees? I don't believe it does. A not-for-profit, number 1, it says here, 0 hours, paid for work done, and travel and training. Ah, not-for-profit organisation, slightly better terms and conditions. Not-for-profit 3, an organisation contracted, permanent contracted workers, but paid for work done, again, and not travel time. So halfway there, your job is safe, but nonetheless we're not paying you travel time, which means that when, and other consequences of when you're not paid travel time, depending on the ratio of travel time to contact time, would you believe you can actually fall below the minimum wage? Quite easily. Less than the minimum wage because of these arrangements. Again, a not-for-profit organisation, simply paid for work done, doesn't mention in this particular survey whether it covers travel time. We don't want to repeat that race to the bottom where terms and conditions are sacrificed in order that the service, such as it is, can be delivered at a profit or not at a loss, depending upon what type of organisation you've got. And yet, that's what we have. And the change for family nursing and home care services is as follows. And it's serious in the reduction of all sorts of terms and conditions. So previously, all employees were permanent, either on a full-time contract or a part-time contract. And many are on part-time contracts. Part-time contracts because it enables them either to work a late shift or more often a morning shift, to be finished by 1, to look after their family. That's what suits. The replacement is variable hours. Sometime between 7 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock at night, you will be asked to do whatever, 5 hours of contact. Imagine being in your uniform with 5 hours of contact, which may, not always, but may be 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Paid for 5 hours contact time. Basic pay reduced from £13.14 hourly previously to £12 hourly, about a 10% reduction, cutting wages. And evening, Saturday and Sunday working, higher rates, vastly reduced. It's all on there on page 8 of my document. Sick pay, again, reduced. Holiday pay, reduced. Pension pay, was Pecker's, is now reduced to a 5% contributory scheme. So on all levels, those terms and conditions have been vastly reduced. What's the process like in the rest of the 22 organisations which are delivering in competition with family nurses? We've got a 0 hours contract on number 1 with £1.25 per visit if the shift is under 8 hours. £1.25 per visit. No matter how much travelling that requires, £1.25. Again, agency 3, 0 hours, travel at 50p a mile. Oh, jolly good. Or £5 an hour, whichever is the least. Agency 5, paid travel time. Good. 60 pence a mile if transporting the client. So slightly better. Again, agency 7, some 0 hours, but paid travel time. 9 does pay mileage, but no travel time, 20p a mile. Travel time in number 10, incorporated in the hourly rate. So what we have is a reduction in terms and conditions about to be agreed, stroke forced through in the next couple of months. And some of the worst practices in the market now taking place, replacing what were good terms and conditions for the workforce. And what I suggest in my report is that we must find a way to prevent this race to the bottom from happening in Jersey. That is no way to guarantee a safe, a caring, and a nurturing society for these particular clients. And that we have the chance not to. The Minister, in his wisdom, has said, but we don't have the laws in place to do that. What my proposition says, get the law in place, get the regulations, work them through to make sure that you're providing a safe and effective system where your care workers feel they are valued, because that's critical in doing what we do. Now, the Minister is saying we can't do anything about it, neither in the care law nor in the employment law. Neither work in order to protect these workers and to protect those clients. Now, this morning, on my way in, I met the Chief Minister briefly in the hallway, and he said, I note your reference on page 14 and 15, it didn't say 14 and 15, it said reference at the back of your report to the Unison Ethical Care Charter. And he said, now, this is something, perhaps, that I'm interested in, that we might be able to develop. I won't go into the details, because members have had my report. It's on page 14 and 15. It's not perfect, but it is a way forward and might mean that we can find a way to solve what I think is going to be a massive problem as we go forward. And I recommend that before members vote on this particular proposition, that they pay attention to the Ethical Care Charter, which actually applies some ethics to the looking after the care that we need in our society from professionals. And I point members to page 13 of my proposition, which looks at the satisfaction levels of clients in the UK between the council service, as it was there, the state service, what would be equivalent to what we've been doing, and the private sector in terms of key elements. And what we find is, for the in-house service, help with washing and bathing, an 86% satisfaction rating. Very satisfied. Compared to the private sector satisfaction rating of 39%. Help with dressing, the in-house, proper care, 87% satisfaction compared to 53% in the private sector. Assisting people to get to bed, 100% very satisfied, people turning up at the right times, people being caring, people undressing them and making sure they get to bed correctly. 100% satisfaction rating compared to 67 in the private sector. Do they turn up on time? Do they get packed off to bed early? All sorts of things that actually mean that a relationship between the carer and the client can easily break down. So, my proposition says we have a problem coming. In fact, it's already here because we have some 50 plus employees, ex-employees, oh no, they are still employed by family nurses in the home care sector, not signing this new contract. There will be a shortage of care sector workers. Are we going to do some joined-up thinking and actually examine that? Let's see if we can make a deal where workers and clients and the government is content, or are we going to go down the road, I believe, to ruination in this sector, whereby we have to import some more fairly low-skilled workers into the island in order to make up the numbers so that we can provide some sort of care system. Because if we're actually doing any joined-up thinking together, then surely the former is far better than the latter, replacing 50-odd highly skilled, long-time served, skillful workers with people from wherever who are coming to the island and don't know about its clients and its conditions and terms. I think that my proposition addresses the issues. I have yet to see anything concrete, because I looked in the comments and thought, oh well, the Chief Minister said the ethical care charter might work for us, maybe we should go forward with that. And I look in vain in the comments to any reference to it. There is none. So, although the Chief Minister might say that might be a way forward So we have an alternative to your proposition, Jeff. Sorry, Deputy Southern. I'm allowed to. No, I'm not. But it's not in the comments. So there's no plans for the alternative. This is what we appear to be going ahead with, and within the month, we may find that we are between 30 and 50 of care workers short because they have maintained their position and refused to sign new contracts. Or do we have an alternative? I don't think there is one. There's certainly not one in view, and yet this issue needs addressing. I think a vote for this proposition says to the Council of Ministers and the Chief Minister and the Health Minister, come on, this is a problem you need to deal with. If not this, then come up and bring your scheme that's going to deal with it. Because at the moment, I think we're on the road to ruin.
Proposition seconded. Does any member wish to speak? Chief Minister.
So a lot of what Deputy Southern has spoken about during the course of his opening proposal, I have a great deal of sympathy for. Sometimes when people stand up and say that, I say, well, do something about it then. His proposal seeks to address the concerns that he has just outlined. And I do think, and I've said previously, that we need to be mindful that those working in the care sector in this particular area of the care sector are extremely important because they're caring for vulnerable members of our community. And ideally, as the Deputy said, we want these individuals to almost become part of our families and care in that way. Our society has changed. Some of these jobs, some of this caring profession historically would have been done and undertaken by family members. In a more diverse community that we have become, some members of our community are not surrounded by their families, and their families may be facing other pressures from the ones that they've faced historically, and therefore rely on care workers, as I say, to take on a role akin to that which was undertaken by family members in the past. And I do not want to see, as I know no other minister wants to see, those in this particular area of the caring profession receive and have lesser standards than elsewhere in our workforce. And I think, forgive me if Deputy Southern mentioned this, but I think if one looks particularly to the United Kingdom, one sees the standard of protections and therefore ultimately the standard of care provided being correlated. And I think we're all aware of instances where the standard of protection for these workers has been low, and that has ultimately led to a very low and unacceptable standard of care. I don't want that to be the case here in Jersey. I don't think any of us aspire to that. Deputy Southern feels in his proposition that addressing that issue is done by, first of all, saying that people should be removed from the approved provider framework. The approved provider framework is in place until the regulation of care law regulations and framework is introduced. So that would be only a short-term measure. It would, if voting for it today, potentially have unknown financial consequences to the long-term care scheme. And therefore, I don't think can be agreed. Likewise, the new Care Commission are very strongly of the view that the regulation of care law should be a law which deals with just that, the regulation of care, and doesn't mix the regulation of care with appropriate employment protections. But as Deputy Southern alluded to, I'm not going to say buried in the back of his proposition, but in the later in his proposition, he talks and refers to something called the Unison Ethical Care Charter. And it seems to me, when I discussed with officers in my department, that being the department wherein the regulation of care law and the Care Commission sit, it seems to me that working through a Jersey potential equivalent of that ethical care charter, having said that, of course, it's been in place, as I understand it, for over 10 years. So we could look to update that. It does not directly, again, as I understand it, deal with rates of pay, which would have a knock-on effect to the long-term care provision, because long-term care is provided to the individual for then onward transmission to the carer or care agency. And I know that some members in this assembly know that there are refinements and improvements that can be made in that regard. And one of the issues that members of our community are currently finding with the long-term care charge, and we knew that this was an issue that would ultimately need to be addressed when it was introduced, was, if I revert back to my earlier theme about carers becoming like family, there are informal carers for whom families would like to be able to access the long-term care funding, and they're currently finding it difficult because it doesn't fit into that framework. And so that framework, on the one hand, is about providing protection, but on the other hand, it really does need to be flexible enough to allow ultimately, as we go forward, for, I think, more informal type arrangements with some oversight. And that is a challenge for the department and the scheme as we currently stand. But I think that marrying potentially that desire with work on an ethical care charter might be a suitable stopgap and a way forward. And I did suggest to Deputy Southern that perhaps he deferred his debate today so that we could sit down with him and undertake some of that work. But I know that the Health Minister is not in a position to be able to accept this. What Deputy Southern is proposing, I don't actually think is possible under that regulation of care law anyway, and therefore, whilst wanting to work with him to deliver the desirability of appropriate protections and appropriate payments to those in this area of the caring profession, I think that that can, at this point, be better undertaken through working together on either the Unison Ethical Care Charter, a Jersey version of it, to make sure that we don't fall into the traps that others have experienced, because it's a really important area today, and it's going to be even more important into the future as we have the ageing demographic. So I think that ministers understand the Deputy's concerns, and would like to work with him on suitable methodologies of addressing those concerns. But it seems to us that the actual straightforward proposal, as it is in black and white, won't legally work. And that creates a problem for us. It means we're going to have to vote against the black and white words in the proposition, but whilst at the same time wanting to work with the Deputy along some type of ethical care charter, because I think that's in everyone's interest. And I do apologise, sir. The Deputy says there's no mention of that in the department's comments. The comments were issued by the, and he's right, the comments were issued by the Health and Social Services Department, and I've only, not sure whether it was yesterday or it was Friday. Seem to have been quite busy, sir. And it was yesterday, and it was only as I was preparing for today's business yesterday and understanding what was possible that I made it very clear to my particular officer's department that this was the approach that I would like to see them take. It can't be right simply to say no to Deputy Southern's proposition without having another approach that would help deliver some of those safeguards that he has rightly, I think rightly, highlighted to us. I don't think he's going to withdraw it, sir, which is a shame, because I hope he would and bring it back if we didn't make progress on such a charter-type approach, because I think that is the best way forward. It would be something that the entire Assembly could get behind. Thank you, sir.
Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me. It is absolutely essential that we get properly organised in this sector, because, as other speakers have said, we are dealing with a particularly vulnerable sector of society who very often are incapable of complaining, or else they're too afraid to complain lest they get no assistance or lose their help. Now, the level of training in family nursing and home care is exemplary. And it's not always clear that this exists in the private sector, and a regulatory regime appears not yet to have been fully established. The whole point is that we should treat our senior citizens with the same care we would expect for our own parents. You know, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and I've told my son that I want to be treated like I treated my mother. So he looks longingly at the end of the jetty. Anyway. Anyway, the Chief Minister states that we have turned the corner financially. So there's little excuse for us not to adopt Deputy Southern's proposal. I shall be voting for it.
Colin Thompson-John.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to congratulate Deputy Southern for bringing this up. It's a very good, a very emotive proposition. But, unfortunately, and listening to the Chief Minister, and having been through the mills myself with my own dear mother, I cannot agree with this proposition. Elderly people are best looked after by their own family. And it is the family, in so many cases, that know what is best and are able to employ people directly. And the proposition is suggesting that they should be through an approved provider. In other words, there's a middleman. And that only adds to the costs very, very substantially. Both the proposer and the Chief Minister talked of being part of the family. And yes, carers do become part of the family. And that is why it is so important that the family themselves are involved with the carers and those who help in any way in helping the elderly. A very good piece of legislation was passed last year, brought by the Chief Minister, allowing the elderly, before they get too far into their senior years, to appoint executors. And you can, is that the right term?
I think you mean attorneys without...
Attorneys.
They cannot transact.
Attorneys, I do beg your pardon, yes. Some of my rural activities coming into mind there. Attorneys, and you can have up to 3, one responsible for your finances, one responsible for your care, and one responsible for your health. And by having these individuals appointed to these positions, what is the point if they then simply appoint a care provider rather than employing direct? It is very important. But there is an issue in that in care providers, there is a significant difference between the wages they pay and the wages they charge to the elderly. And this is best resolved in a different way to that this proposition is proposing. And a charter, as the Chief Minister has said earlier, is without doubt one of the ways, and we need to explore if that is the best, and if so, how it should be implemented here on the island. I would urge members to reject this because I don't believe that this is the right way to go forward. Yes, we need to support the elderly. Yes, we need to support carers. But I don't think we should be supporting the middlemen in the form of approved care providers. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak? Deputy Bree.
Thank you very much, sir. Firstly, if I may respond to the Chief Minister's comments that he is unable to support this proposition, where there is a will, there is a way. To my mind, the Chief Minister's speech actually clearly illustrated the lack of joined-up thinking that this government suffers from. Government has a duty of care to the whole population, and that includes care workers who deliver a core component of the overall healthcare offering and strategy. Now, for this government to actually effectively wash its hands of any responsibility in this respect will create, quite simply, a race to the bottom. Because market forces, once they get engaged in this, think about one thing and one thing only, and that is profitability. It's not level of care. It is not workers' conditions. It's profit. And also, by not supporting what I consider to be a very astute proposition from Deputy Southern, by not supporting it, this government will actually be neglectful in its duty of care to those receiving care. Maintaining the quality of care to the elderly and the vulnerable people is the highest priority. And high quality of care comes from quality staff. No matter what you do in this world, if you run a company or work with people, you are only as good as the people working with or for you. Now, the long-term care scheme was aimed to provide quality care in the home for as long as possible, until, due to one reason or another, you may require nursing care or prefer to move into a residential home. But that provision of quality care in the home will not work, nor will it achieve its objectives, if the dedicated quality staff are not available. And they're not available because of a lack of government regulations or requirements about working conditions, about pay. We have a duty of care to all sectors of this population. So, how short-sighted have we become that we bow to market forces over our duty of care? I would submit, sir, in summing up, that this Council of Ministers has actually forgotten about its duty of care, particularly to the elderly. And as such, we should support this proposition and all of us work together to find the best solution that will provide the highest quality care to the elderly and the vulnerable, who should be valued members of our society. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak?
Thank you, sir. And I rise to speak partly from my own knowledge, but partly as Chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. And in the course of our work, we have come to the view that it certainly is the case.
Deputy, could you put your...
Oh, yes.
So, I apologise.
It certainly is the case that numbers of care workers are employed on zero-hour contracts without any security of work. They have to be available for long hours, and there are increasing time pressures to complete the tasks and move on. All of this may not be the case with all firms that provide care and are on the approved provider list, but it is certainly the case in some of them. Workers are given short notice of the shifts they have to carry out. They're on low wages, and there is no payment for travel time. There's no payment for the cost of using their vehicle, and there's no pension contribution or general employment benefits like that. So where these terms and conditions apply, it can lead to tired and demoralised care workers who feel that they are not valued by their employers. And if the community, we as a States Assembly, allow that situation to continue, then they will feel they're not valued by their community and by the people who govern them. And in the UK, we've seen the results of care providers who wish to maximise their returns and reduce their costs, and the labour being the principal costs. They just pile on increasing pressures on their workers. This, in examples we've seen from the UK, can lead to the neglect of their clients, the loss of dignity of the clients, and worse, injury and harm to clients. We particularly touched on this issue as a scrutiny panel when we carried out a review on zero-hour working. And we made specific key findings and recommendations about the issue of not paying for travel time. We felt that was unfair. And unfortunately, the response received, considered by the Council of Ministers, was that the panel hadn't produced enough evidence of this abuse, despite the fact that we had conducted a SurveyMonkey poll, but there wasn't enough evidence in the view of the Council of Ministers. It was also said that the time travelling in Jersey is bound to be less onerous than in the UK. How long does it take to get from the east of the island across to St. Brelade's through the busy town traffic? And it was also said that no one has complained to Jacks about it. That was the response. In addition, it was said, those working under zero-hour contracts have a choice about their hours and the number of clients they choose to accept each day. Reading directly from the response. Really? In this sector, the care workers sector? Can it be said that care workers really have a choice about their hours and the clients they accept? Oh yes, nominally on their contracts, zero-hour contracts, but members, I trust, will understand the constraints upon these workers on zero-hour contracts. And because we noticed it, and the Minister noticed it when saying that we hadn't produced enough evidence, can one imagine the reticence there is on a zero-hour worker with no security of employment wanting to come and speak to politicians about the terms and conditions on which they're employed? No, we got no open submissions like that, despite the usual publicity, despite us attempting to try, despite consulting with all the representative groups and asking if anyone wished to tell us. Is it surprising, therefore, that Jacks has received no complaints? Does it mean that this isn't happening? No, it's much more likely to mean that these workers are terrified about talking about their terms and conditions in case they lose what opportunities they have to work. So let's not be fooled. Let's understand that the employers have the upper hand here. In our report on zero hours, we recommended that the Minister consider introducing similar standards to the Unison Ethical Care Charter, and that was dismissed without any suggestion as put forward by the Chief Minister today that it can be looked at. So why was it dismissed just 18 months ago? Again, it was said it's not needed because we haven't brought forward any evidence as to its need. We have the opportunity, I submit, to do things differently here because the long-term care scheme and the regulation of care is still in its infancy. We haven't, in fact, got the regulation of care scheme up and running just yet, so we have a chance to put it on a proper footing. But it does need direction from this Council of Ministers. So I read in the comments paper that there is no intention to take any action as a result of this proposition. But I don't feel that is good enough. What will the Council of Ministers do about this issue? The comments paper doesn't tell us anything. So is it still the case they are proposing to do absolutely nothing as per the response to our 0 hours contract report? Will at least the Council of Ministers commit to working on a charter which will be included as a code of conduct for all care providers to observe, or if they choose not to observe it, then the onus is on those care providers to justify their actions. In a similar way we do to financial services companies in a completely different realm. Financial service companies are regulated highly, but under codes of conduct. It's not the law, but if they choose not to observe those codes of conduct, a very harsh onus is on them to justify their actions. So, Council of Ministers, I would ask, sir, should bring this forward as a means of writing in a code of conduct to the future regulation of care regulations. Because at the moment, all we have in the comments paper is a fear that this will drive up costs to the long-term care fund. But what about the social value of ensuring that care is delivered to a high quality and as a measure of excellence? That will ultimately save costs, because we don't want to get into a situation where you have a constant turnover of care workers who are not performing adequately, who are pressurized in their time and the care they can deliver to their clients. That will ultimately lead to greater cost. We should surely be looking at the delivery of the most excellent standard of care. This is an essential component of the new health service, and we should be concerned to make sure that those delivering that component of our health service are treated properly. We must invest in that workforce, it seems to me, because this is not private sector enterprise that this assembly can say it's down to industry and nothing to do with government, because long-term care funds are being paid to companies that are approved providers of care. It is proper to ensure that the funds coming from long-term care funds, taxpayers' money, are used to maintain excellence in care. And therefore, I have to say, I'm extremely disappointed with the response from the Council of Ministers. I would have hoped for an acknowledgement that something will be done. Some standards will be put in place, and not just it is impossible and that nothing is proposed. I acknowledge that Deputy Southern's proposals are perhaps clunky. They don't fit within the approved provider framework. You'd have to change the law. But in the absence of anything positive coming from the Council of Ministers, I feel I must vote with Deputy Southern to send that message that something should be done. So that, I'm afraid, is what I am driven to, and I hope other members may feel the same concern that I do, and send a message to this Council of Ministers. Thank you, sir.
Call on the Health Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I think probably I need to start with a point of clarification, possibly an apology, because the way that I read this proposition was that Deputy Southern was trying to negotiate terms and conditions, particularly for family nursing, but for that area of care on the floor of this Assembly, sir. And that is wholly wrong. And that's how I read it, and that's my reason for opposing this. That said, the chairman of the scrutiny panel just asked, would somebody from the Council of Ministers stand up and commit to the Ethical Care Charter? Well, I think Chief Minister's already done that, but I align myself with that, sir. But I can't support this proposition because terms and conditions of employment are a matter, providing they fit with the law of the land, are a matter for the employer. So members might also like to be made aware that the report that Deputy Southern quoted from was a 10-year-old report in Tower Hamlets of London. So it's completely irrelevant to Jersey. It was produced, I believe, by the union Unison. But aside from that, sir, the reason that the UK have so many problems is that they didn't have the vision that this Assembly had to bring in the long-term care scheme. I know that it's 1% that everybody pays, but they didn't have the vision to bring that in. So very often, providers in the UK are trying to cut their cloth to meet the allowance, the funding that the individual has to provide to buy that care. Because very often councils are either reducing funding or not funding it at all. We're in a totally different ballgame here, sir. The long-term care scheme, providing the person meets the criteria and is assessed as such, that money is available for them to spend with whichever provider they choose to use. So in answer to, particularly to the chairman's comments, will Council of Ministers commit to the Ethical Care Charter? Yes, I will, but I cannot commit to negotiating wages or terms and conditions on this Assembly floor. It's wholly wrong, and that's the stance that I took, sir. Thank you.
Any other member wish to speak?
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry Deputy Bree has just left the Assembly, because I have to take exception with his comments about the Council of Ministers having forgotten about the care of our community. We have only recently appointed a care commissioner whose responsibility it is to ensure that people who are being cared for in our community are receiving the appropriate level of care. And I can assure you that having made the Commissioner aware of this particular proposition, that he has indicated that this will not achieve what I think we all want, is to ensure that people within our community are cared in an appropriate way. And he cannot see that, that this will do what we all want. And I think that's been highlighted by the Health Minister as well. There is a commitment to ensure that people are, because there's going to be more people cared for in our community, and that is where people want to be cared for. We want to ensure that they are receiving the correct amount of care. It's been highlighted, we have the long-term care provision, which is ensuring that people have some funding to buy their own care so they can stay within their own homes. And we should welcome that and celebrate that, because that is something which this Assembly has achieved in recent times. We've seen what's happening in the UK, where they are struggling to they're actually probably going to end up copying what we're doing, because it is actually a very, very good scheme. I'm pleased the Health Minister has given a commitment to look at the Ethical Care Charter, which has been highlighted by the proposer of this, this proposition. It is something that I chair the Children and Vulnerable Adults group, and we look at all social policy matters as a group of ministers. And I can assure you that we know that we need to ensure that the care of the not only the elderly, the vulnerable, people with disabilities, they all do require a level of care which is appropriate for their own personal circumstances. And that is what we hope to be able to achieve by doing that. But Deputy Sutherland has a germ of a issue here which needs to be addressed. There's no doubt about it, but except that there is things that we need to ensure that the people the people who are working within our care community are being supported, not only financially but in all other terms, in training and to be ensured that they can deliver the care that we want for our people. There's three of us now who have stood up and given the assurance that the Ethical Care Charter is something we want to work to, and I can assure you that the Council of Ministers has not forgotten about care of our community, and we want to ensure that that appropriate care is there. Unfortunately, this proposition doesn't achieve that, and so I ask members to, although asking them to reject this proposition, I do give a commitment as much as I can as an Assistant Minister, but as far as the Chief Minister has said and the Health Minister has said, we want to ensure that the appropriate care is available for our community.
Deputy Tripty.
Thank you, sir. Like all of us here, I think we all want to make sure that those who need and receive care in the community get the best care possible, delivered by the best person possible. And during my career, sir, most of my 25 years in nursing was looking after patients in the community. And I have to say here, sir, that it's been one of the most rewarding and humbling parts of my career, caring for people in their own homes, surrounded by family and friends who they love. And that's why, sir, one of the reasons why the regulation of care came to being and came to this House, which this House approved. Because regulation wasn't part of the caring in the community. And so there's been agencies around for many, many, many years in Jersey, all able to do more or less what they'd like. So that's why the regulation of care was so important, to ensure that it was up to a professional standard and that it is regulated, properly controlled and looked after by making sure that you've got staff going into caring for patients who are trained, as well as, because training is an important part, as well as being professional. So that regulation of care law has achieved, and it is a journey. We know it's a journey. We know it's the journey, I think, which scrutiny panel brought for one of the recommendations back in 2007. So it is a journey, and the journey is still on. And as Deputy Woodchair has just mentioned, another part of the journey is to put a commissioner in place. And that has been done. And I've been fortunate enough to meet him, and personally wise, I was very, very impressed. So, but working with that commissioner and putting in place how the care is going to be regulated is the next stage. As I said, it is a journey. And what Deputy Southern here is trying to achieve in his proposition, sir, as it's been said by other ministers, I now get what he was, because first of all I read it like the health minister did, regarding family nursing services, who have done and always will do, provide a very good service. So, but if you mention going on the back page, the Unison Ethical Care Charter, I'm sure we can all sign up to that. That is something that we want, that we should have in our caring for people in the community, sir. But the two don't quite marry up. And I'm sorry, I would like to, but I can't support Deputy Southern, because like him, I want to achieve the best possible care in the community. But I could sign up to the Unison Care Charter, and it's something that we, and I know the Chief Minister has mentioned that to Deputy Southern, to work with his commissioner, to work with the other commissioners now who've just been appointed, to achieve something that is really good, really does make a difference to people receiving care in the community. And so, sir, I'll leave that to say, please look carefully at what's proposed in the proposition, sir, and the ethical care. We can all sign up to that, but that's not what is in the proposition, sir. Thank you.
Can I just say to those who are listening to this debate in the ante-room that we are down to the minimum number in the chamber, so it would be helpful if some would return in case any in the chamber have an urgent need to go out. Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Tattier.
Thank you, sir. When the last few ministers have got up to say, actually, I perhaps misunderstood that, and we've even had an apology from the health minister, I was waiting for the point at which they would say, and that's why now we can support Deputy Southern's proposition, because we agree with the principle and we misunderstood what we thought we'd read first of all, and actually we're all on the same hymn sheet, because we're getting a lot of rhetoric here. We're getting a lot of nice words of sympathy, but we're not getting any commitment to action. I think the closest we've had was Senator Ruccia, who said, as far as I can as an assistant minister, I can give a commitment that appropriate care should be available in the community. I mean, of course, I think that's that's simply a truism which you would expect of any, and not just minister, but any right-thinking individual in or outside this chamber. Of course we want appropriate care available in the community, but it's a question of how we deliver that. And this proposition isn't simply about workers, or rather, it's not simply about the level of care that is delivered. It makes the link between terms and conditions, and similarly, it's not simply...
Could I ask you to sit down, Deputy, please? I'm afraid we've come in quorate. Can I ask those outside to return to the chamber forthwith? Deputy, please continue. Thank you.
So it might be tempting, and I'm sure this is where the Health Minister has repeatedly been coming from during question time, to say, This is an issue of terms and conditions to do with workers, and that's between the worker and the employer. And that's the line which the Minister has continually taken and said, I can't therefore get involved because that's not a matter for me, it's not a matter for us. And that might be true if there was absolutely no link between the level of care which is delivered, both not just theoretically but practically in the community, and the fact that we actually have real humans who need to do this very important and often important work that other people won't do for whatever reason, either because they have other jobs, they've got busy lives. And it's not everybody, remember, in our community who will do these jobs. I remember somebody else once commented in a debate that it's often the lowest paid jobs that are the ones that nobody else wants to do. And there's a paradox there. In fact, I think we all agree that no amount of remuneration can ever be good enough. And these individuals, of course, don't do it for the money. It's a vocation by and large. And the clue is in the name when it comes to care. They are carers first and foremost. So I ask the question, who cares for our carers in the community? Who looks after their interests? And there is an intrinsic link between the fact that if you have essentially a race to the bottom, a levelling down, and what Deputy Southern here is trying to do is to establish a minimum standard to level up, saying we as a states in the health department, we have a certain standard which we apply to our employees and which we think is correct and good practice for our employees, which we would adhere to. You should apply that across the board. Now, I'm slightly uncomfortable, perhaps understandably where my politics come from, that we outsource care anyway. It's the private sector that provides care in some instances, but we don't do that at the hospital, do we? I mean, the hospital isn't yet privatised, although don't give them too much, otherwise they might do it. There's a risk we're going to move towards a world where healthcare becomes privatised, and that's a scary thought. Hopefully it's not going to be the case, but it is the case for some reason when it comes to long-term care, to the care of the elderly, first and foremost, although not exclusively, of course, for the elderly. There are others who need to be remembered in this equation, who need long-term care, who are not necessarily elderly throughout the whole of their lives. And this is about establishing the link, because if somebody can't get access to sick pay, if they're going into work when they are ill, okay, there's a practical risk there for the person who's being cared after. It might be that you go into work when you have a cold, for example. Sounds fairly innocuous, but then you pass on those germs to the person that you're caring for, who may have a lower immune system than you've got already. Or it might be actually much more likely that because you're getting paid less, you're having to do more hours because you found that your travel time's being cut, you have to work more, you're not spending the time with your family, and actually you become run down. So you don't necessarily become physically ill, although you may become susceptible to that, and you can't provide the same level of care that you want to those individuals in the community, in our communities, and we all know them. I mean, this is not simply about statistics, this isn't about figures and money, these are about individuals in our communities who both provide the care, the much needed care, but also those who are in receipt of the care. And we know that family nursing in particular are a very much respected part of the community, not just for the care, but also the important role and the relationships that they build and establish within the community. And it is very much a two-way street. It's emotional as well as physical support that is given. And when we actually say we're going to wash our hands of this as an assembly, when the government and the minister says, I'm not concerned about terms and conditions, that's a matter purely for the free market, that cannot be acceptable in the case when they're delivering something on our behalf. Of course there are certain contexts when we don't interfere in the free market, when it's completely different. We don't tell people what they can charge for ice creams. We do, interestingly, regulate taxi fares, but let's not go down that route today. But there are certain things, of course, where government doesn't get involved in. But when it comes to a service which ostensibly or arguably we should be providing ourselves, but we farmed it out, of course, we need to make sure that we put the right checks and balances in place. And this is all that Deputy Southern is asking for in parts A, B and C in here, is to make sure that there is a relevant framework. There will be, of course, a body of work that the Minister needs to go away and do to ensure that we have the right terms and conditions so that the right level of care can be delivered in a practical sense in the community. And I would hope that we could all agree with this and that we give a green light for the Minister to go away and make appropriate terms and conditions to level up and not level down in something which is only going to become more and more important as time goes on.
Does any other member wish to speak? Not that I call on the Deputy Southern to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I'll respond, if I may, to individuals later on, but I want to start with a paragraph that I think is germane to what I'm trying to do. And it's the paragraph that comes from the comments on page 3 from the Minister of Health. The 2014 law, which was adopted by 43 votes to 6 by the States Assembly on the 3rd of July 2014, and associated regulations, fall within the remit of the Chief Minister as opposed to the Minister of Health and Social Services. It is envisaged that the remaining provisions of the 2014 law will come into force towards the end of 2017, pending the states agreeing and adopting regulations and orders made under this law. Regulations relating to the definition of regulated services and to standards and requirements are currently being drafted to a stakeholder consultation process. These regulations do not relate to standards of employment because the law does not provide the relevant powers. I ask this chamber, who makes law in Jersey? I ask this chamber, who makes regulations in Jersey? And I ask this chamber, who makes orders in Jersey? And the answer is this chamber. In the latter case of orders, the Council of Ministers. The regulations do not relate to the standards of employment because the law does not provide for the relevant powers. So let's change the law, because there is a clear, I think, manifest link between working under poor terms and conditions and endangering, putting at risk the health and safety of the clients to which you're delivering that system. We can do it if we choose. Don't be a cannot do. And returning to those who spoke, all of whom I thank, because it's not an easy area in which to deal, but one that nonetheless we have to do. And I'll start with the Chief Minister's words, where he offered sympathy to me. And he said the obvious response is, well, why don't you do something about it? Well, I'll give him the obvious response. Well, why don't you do something about it? You're the lawmaker, you're the maker of regulations. This could happen if you decide so. When he refers to not going down the path that the Care Commission regulation of care that's occurred in the UK, he neglects to say that actually our regulation of care law and our Care Commission is based almost identically on the UK system. And as he rightly says, the UK system has not got the checks and balances in place, and their service is somewhat lacking. And yet we have nothing on our statute which would change that. And as a general point, but I'll address it to the Chief Minister, he suggested that we should work together. How would we work together? When would we work together? When could we seek agreement? When could we open talks? This is a question that within the month there will be 30 plus dedicated care workers out of work, to be replaced by people from who knows where. I don't know. But what was missing from the Chief Minister's contribution, his Assistant Minister, the Health Minister's contribution, the Housing Minister's contribution, what was missing was anything concrete at all as to what's the way forward. We don't like this. We're not prepared to change any regulations. We're not prepared to change any laws. There's nothing we can do apart from some vague agreement that working towards an ethical care charter is the way forward. But nothing concrete. No dates, no times. Let's get together this week, next week. Let's start thrashing it out. We're prepared to talk to the current care workers who are in dispute. Let's start working out if we can get to that position. Nothing concrete at all. Just some vague whiffle full of sympathy and tears. No contact. The Minister of Health says he's no relationship at all to the delivery of what he's bound to do, which is a care service which is fit. And if one of his mechanisms of delivery through family nurses happens to break down, that's not his responsibility. But I'm sorry, Minister of Health, yes it is, because you're responsible for moving from P82 towards delivery of care in the community. Nothing is in place to change things. The only response for the ministers is, you came with the wrong proposition. And the natural consequence of that is, where's the amendment? Where's the bit where we could put in something in regulation to actually address these issues? It's not there. Ever and again, this Council of Ministers just says, no, backbencher, we don't agree with you, we're not prepared to do anything. Not an amendment, not our scheme. Thank you for getting us going, because we've got a scheme here. That'll do the business. I'd love to be able to say, as the Chief Minister said to me, you know, would you be prepared to withdraw this proposition? The answer is no, because there's nothing concrete to put in its place. Nothing at all. Apart from some will-o'-the-wisp, we're in sympathy with you, we're going nowhere. And the fact is that, as Senator Ferguson said, the levels of training and care in family nursing are without peer, either on this island, probably, and off this island. And that's where we should be going. Deputy Bree, quite rightly, looked for joined-up thinking and said it was completely absent from the Minister's response, and referred several times, I think, to the duty of care to the whole population, and that incidentally includes the increasing numbers of elderly and those who are vulnerable and need home care. It's part of their plan. Why is it not catered for? Why had they not seen this coming? I'll leave that unanswered. Perhaps members in their voting can answer it for me. And he talked time and time again, not just about the delivery of minimum care, but the quality of care. And that is by no means guaranteed. The Deputy of St. One, my chairman, quite rightly pointed out to the damage that is done through 0 hours contracts and their imposition, and talked about the imbalance of power between the care worker and the employer, which says, actually, you're probably better not to make a fuss, unless, of course, you feel that you cannot other than make a fuss. And he referred to the lack of dignity incurred by the use of zero-hours contracts inappropriately, and even the potential injury and damage to clients. And he referred again to the charter which we first recommended in our report on 0 hours, and the charter on care in particular, is a way forward. And if the council of ministers could find a way to come up with that alternative in a decent level of time, then perhaps there would be no need for me to bring a proposition. And perhaps we might have got somewhere already on the ethical care charter. And since it's been mentioned, I will just briefly refer to a number of its conditions. The ethical care charter for commissioning of home care services. And this is one we have. It's already in place. The starting point for commissioning of visits will be client need, not minutes or tasks. Workers will have the freedom to provide appropriate care and will be given time to talk to their clients. So we're already there on that one. We don't have 15-minute appointments anywhere, as far as I know. And we have a system whereby the need of the client is assessed by social workers, and that's what drives the system. So that's in place. We can make a start there and then move on to home care workers will be paid for their travel time, their travel costs, and other necessary expenses, such as mobile phones. There's a simple way to make sure the system works better. Those home care workers who are eligible must be paid statutory sick pay. Well, it'll be different for us because we've already got that in place. But sick pay, which doesn't make care workers feel that they have to go in work to look after a vulnerable client when they are putting that vulnerable client at risk, as mentioned by Deputy Tadier. And when we look at that sick pay condition, I came across a contract with an employee, not in the care industry, elsewhere, where the total sick pay, the total sick leave that the employee is allowed is 4 weeks per year. Otherwise, it's a sackable offence. I know of a case with 4 different bouts of just a week, breached the 4 week, that's what you're allowed, that person's been sacked. 4 separate chest infections, heavy cold, influenza indicators, and sacked. That's not the right way to treat sick leave. And I mentioned this before, I mentioned it again, in terms of holiday. If you're on a 0 hours contract, you get your holiday pay wrapped up in your weekly or monthly pay, which means that you never get to save it, which means that you never get the holiday, which gives you a break, unless you're ill. I refer to a worker who said, that's the first holiday I've had in 5 years. And what it was a long weekend in a caravan in France. And she came back refreshed instead of the usual tired, pushing herself to do those hours to make the quality of her care actually count. And continuing with just a brief exploration of the Ethical Care Charter, clients will be allocated the same home care worker wherever possible. That's just about to be broken. Within a month, there'll be a group of clients out there, family and nursing, who'll be getting a new face to bathe them, to wash them, to get them up, put them to bed. Yes, hopefully they can make that relationship. Zero-hour contracts will not be used in place of permanent contracts. That should be written in stone. We could do that. It's totally inappropriate to use that cost-saving technique on care workers. Home care workers will be given the opportunity to regularly meet co-workers to share best practice and limit their isolation. One of the factors, again, keeps being told time and time again by workers that they feel isolated. Where's the support network for them in delivering their care? And finally, and this is something that obviously is a little way off, but could make a start to a wider aim of our society, all home care workers will be paid at least the living wage. This would require the living wage to be in place at whatever rate is seen acceptable. Now there's a nice thing. Let's ensure that people get paid a respectful and respectable wage in order to do this vital job. And finally, all home care workers will be covered by an occupational sick pay scheme to ensure that staff do not feel pressured to work when they're ill in order to protect the welfare of vulnerable clients. It's not a very complex, nor indeed comprehensive ethical charter, but if one minister had said today, and we will have this in place by X, pick your X, that was less than 2 years, I'd have said, okay, fair enough, I'll give you a hand. That didn't happen. All we've got is what Deputy Southern suggests is not possible to do. We're not prepared to do it. We don't have an alternative, so we're going to vote against it. Wonderful logic. I love it. I'll keep coming back for this, but I'm tired of people's sympathy. Let's see them act. Let's see them deliver. This Council of Ministers must deliver, if not now, then in the very near future, because we're hitting the crunch time. Thank you.
Appell's call for invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on P29, regulation of care workers' employment standards. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of voting, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the proposition has been defeated. 17 votes in favour, 23 votes against. 17, greffier, please.
17 are Senator Ferguson, Constable of St Lawrence, and Deputies Martin, Southern of Greville, Hilton, Lafondre, Kevin Lewis, Tadia of St John, Higgins, Rondell of St Juan, Doublé, Labby, Bree, MacDonald.
So we have the 23.
Excuse me, sir. My vote wasn't registered at all. My lights are still flashing. I know it's not going to make any difference at this stage, but I would have gone with the Deputy Southern, but my lights are still flashing.
Very well, so that will be entered on the in that side. Thank you.
And the 23 Senators Drutier, Osif, McLean, Farnan, Balash, Green, Constables of St Clement, St Mary, St Brelard, St Martin, Greville, St John and Trinity, and the Deputies of Trinity, Noel, Pennell of St Martin, Bryans of St Peter, Norton of St Mary, Truscott and McClinton.
Before we come to item M, I can announce that I've received notice from Deputy Norton that he wishes to tender his resignation from the Privileges and Procedures Committee on the grounds of his existing workload. I mention that now so that the matter will come back on the next occasion. Chairman, you will no doubt wish to nominate a minister or assistant minister to replace him. Now the arrangement of public business.
Yes, thank you, sir. Can I thank Deputy Norton, sir, for his work on the committee? I know it was short, but nevertheless, it was an extremely welcome contribution to our work. Arrangement of public business, sir, as per the consolidated order paper, with the addition on June the 20th of P43 amendments to standing orders in the name of the Privileges and Procedures Committee. Otherwise, the items are as per the order paper, and I would propose that arrangement, sir.
Sir, I've already indicated to members that I was proposing that we have an in-committee debate on the Innovation Fund, which would have to be on, I think, June 6th or 7th. The reason I'm doing so is the fact that we had a statement given to members 2 weeks ago. When a copy of the statement was given to members, some members received a 72-page report at the same time. Other members did not receive a copy, myself included, and therefore we were not in a position to ask any reasonable questions about the Innovation Fund. And therefore, I think it's in the public interest that we should actually have this in-committee debate in 2 weeks' time to get full facts. Thank you.
Griffith. Which is the study order? Can you do this?
Yes, you can. We've had lots of conversations. You can propose it. It's debatable and votable on if members want to.
So do we take that now, do we?
Yeah,
Or
it's
is it?
It's one of the 80s, I think. But it is we've talked about this ourselves.
Do you not have? Am I just forgetting it?
Yeah, it doesn't come up very often, but he's made this proposal. It's debatable and then it's decided. If anyone wants to.
Oh, okay. Is the proposition seconded? So there's a proposition from Deputy Higgins that we have an in-committee debate just on the Innovation Fund. Are you more precise than that?
No, it is actually on the Innovation Fund, so we can actually get to... We've got the Innovation Fund report came out, there's a Committee in Auditor General's report, so we can have a full debate on what actually happened and get the true facts.
Very well, before we go to any vote on that, let's invite anyone wishing to speak. I had sent Joseph first, but no, he's given away. Sent through.
Really, it was just an observation, sir. I was going to be asking for an item to be brought forward to the 6th because the Chief Minister is actually going to be in Paris on the 7th.
I'm sorry, Senator, we're dealing with the...
Well, yes, it actually relates to this. That if we want the Chief Minister to be present for the in-committee debate on the 7th, he unfortunately will have to be in Paris on the 7th. That's the reason I raised that issue. So if we want a full debate on the Innovation Fund, I really think the Chief Minister should be here. But I know that it's the matter that he has to deal with in Paris is vitally important for our island.
Is there any way, sir, that the matter can be brought forward on the 6th?
You'll be able to reply in a moment. Senator Rosen?
Sir, I knew of Deputy Higgins' likelihood of proposing it, but perhaps in summing up, he could explain a little more exactly what he wants to achieve with it, because he said, get to the truth. And I just wondered whether or not what he actually thinks is going to be achieved with it. I think that parliaments should debate matters, sir, or they should discuss things. We have a tradition in this place of only going for something that has an objective. Other parliaments would do this. And my other point was, sir, that there is a scrutiny panel, an economic affairs scrutiny panel, and I would have thought it was appropriate to establish whether or not the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel, which deals with political matters, as opposed to PAC, which are doing, obviously, official officers' matters, was actually going to hold any hearings, and that whether or not the sequencing of this, all this has been a bit of a nightmare for some, as some members will know, but what is going to be if Deputy Higgins could explain what is designed to be achieved, and is this going to cut across, it may be interesting that the chairman of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel would actually say whether he's planning to hold any hearings on these things, or whether or not he would think that the in-committee debate would actually meet his committee's requirements of, no doubt, holding politicians appropriately to account.
Well, come to the chairman in a moment, Deputy Martin.
Yes, sir, and normally I would stand up here and probably support Deputy Higgins. My problem is that along sort of similar lines, how many debates in committee are we going to have on the Innovation Fund? Because PAC are doing a piece of work. There's 2 more reports to come from the Chief Minister's Department, as far as I'm concerned, on officers and something else. So, and they'll all be very interesting, but I want all the facts. I want an in-committee debate. I just think June, unless we're going to have one every time a report comes out, and not define the issues, because I'm sure PAC probably will have some issues, but I don't want 3, and I don't think the Deputy will get 3 in-committee debates for the Innovation Fund. So at the moment, unless he can persuade me otherwise, I'm not supporting this at this time. Don't say we don't need one, but I think it's much too soon. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Bree, is there anything you can add in relation to your panel?
Yes, sir. I think it's important that we clarify the situation with regards to the report on the Innovation Fund. PAC look at historical things, not only financial matters, but also areas of responsibility. The Economic Affairs Development Committee, Economic Affairs Committee, looks at current policy and future policy and draft legislation. It is not our intention to undertake a review at this stage into the report that has been issued so far on the Innovation Fund.
So all I wish to do, sir, is to point out to members that on June the 6th, we have a significant amount of business done already, including the completion of Project 18 on the reform of the states and Chief Minister term limits. So I think we're going to be here for 2 days on those items alone. And if we look forward to the 20th of June, we've got a fairly light agenda. So I would suggest if we are going to have a in-committee debate in the short term, the 20th of June will be a much better date than the 6th of June. Although I do have a lot of sympathy with what Deputy Martin said, that perhaps we should wait till we've got all the reports and all the information available.
Right, Deputy Higgins.
So I am happy to actually put it back to the 20th of June. If the Chief Minister is not going to be here, he has been an important player in the Innovation Fund, and obviously we should hear what he's going to say. If it helps with a business, the 20th of June, I'd prefer to put that date forward. Now, Deputy Martin says we should wait for the other 2 reports. Does anybody get any idea when those 2 reports are coming? They may never come. I certainly don't. I don't think Chief Minister isn't here. They could be taking 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. We may never get the reports. So the point I would make is the other 2 reports are peripheral. Remember, the first report was to do with ministerial responsibility. The second one was to do with officers. And the third one was to do with other grants, etc. So I think there are enough questions to be asked regarding the Innovation Fund report that we received from the Chief Minister 2 weeks ago. It was totally unsatisfactory. It's typical of what ministers do. Expect us to be able to ask questions when you've got the statement in front of you, you're reading it, you're listening to him. He's referring to a report which you have got or you haven't got. If you have got it, how you can read 72 pages quickly enough to be able to ask a reasonable question is unbelievable. So I think it's vitally important that the states should find out exactly what went on. We've got a chance now to do it. If it is the 20th of June, we can go back through the Control and Auditor General's report. We can look at the innovation report that was put forward by the Chief Minister. And if ministers, I was going to use an unparliamentary expression, expedited the 2 other reports that they're talking about, if they think it's that relevant, then I think the 20th of June would be there. Now, there were many unanswered questions, and it's left a very bad taste, not only in states members' mouths on the information we received and how it was done, but also in the public's mind. And part of it is, if we think of what the Chief Minister actually said in his statement at the end, he blamed a number of things. He wanted to see changes to the Troy rule. He felt there were problems with the way that states does its business. There were problems with scrutiny. There were problems with everybody except the Council of Ministers. So these are all questions that I think should be explained in that debate, and let's have it on the 20th. So I propose that we put forward an in-committee debate on the 20th now, sir.
So, as a point of clarification, I wouldn't want
I don't think the member intended to mislead the House, but the officer report is unlikely to be one that would be made public.
That's fine.
The vote is on whether to have an in-committee debate on the Innovation Fund on the 20th of June. Those members in favour, the appel is called for. Right, members return to their seats.
So is this a different proposition? It's a different proposition which we can speak on.
The proposer is proposing the 20th of June instead of the 6th of June. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of voting, I'll ask the greffier to close the voting, and that's the proposition's been adopted. 20 votes in favour, 17 votes against.
So we have the 17, I was going to say ministers, but members.
The 17 contra are Senators Routier, Green, Ferguson, Constables of St Clement, St Lawrence, St Mary, St Brelade, St Martin and Trinity, and Deputies Noel, Pennell of St Martin, Bryant of St Peter, Dubley, Wickenden and Norton. The 20 Senators Osif, McLean, Balash, Constables of St Saviour, Grouville, St John, Deputies Martin, Southern, Lafondre, Kevin Lewis, Tadia of St John, Higgins, Rondell of St Juan, Labby, Bree, MacDonald of St Mary and Truscott.
Well, thank you.
Sir, one other item with regard to the agenda for the next sitting. The Chief Minister, as I said, will be unfortunately out of the island, well, fortunately for us because he's doing something important in Paris. The last item, P31, I was wondering, would it be possible if members would be prepared to take that as the first item on the 6th of June?
Members agree to take that item first.
So would the Speaker explain what the Chief Minister is doing in Paris? I'm sure it is important, it just seems secretive.
I think it's a matter which will be announced nearer the time, because there's two parties to the discussions that are happening, and it'll be more appropriate for that to be announced next week.
Can I see clarification on that? It'll be announced. Sorry, so it'll be announced next week when the State isn't sitting. So is that right? You're going to be making a very important announcement outside the State?
The States now stand adjourned until 9:30 on the 6th of June.